What's going on, everyone? So we have an update in regards to the jersey controversy to kind of bring up people to speed that maybe weren't familiar. Keldon Johnson said on like a radio interview that he was going to keep number 3, which kind of sparked the question of like, okay, what does that mean for Chris Paul? Chris Paul has always been CP3, and Chris Paul has never been willing to change his number. His entire brand, image, everything is centered around CP3, and so much so that Chris Paul wouldn't even give up number 3 to go join LeBron James and Dwayne Wade in Miami, right? I mean, Chris Paul and Dwayne Wade both talked about that story and how Chris Paul was expected and was headed to Miami, and then basically it all kind of went away because of a jersey number. So it was like, he's an all-time great. He's always been CP3. Again, all these big name players, right, usually are tied to their number. I mean, even like in other sports, think of like Tom Brady and, TB12, right? Like, it's just such a huge part of these players' profiles and identities that, somebody like Chris Paul usually goes to a team and, whatever player, unless it's like, a veteran going to a star, if Keldon Johnson was this star, then yeah, he'd probably get to keep the number, but that's not the case here, right? So Chris Paul's going there. He's the star. He's the guy that has the name. He's the guy that has the all-star and the pedigree and, the legacy. Usually that ends up giving up your number and giving it to the guy, right? Well, when Keldon Johnson decided like, hey, not doing that, right? It kind of begged these questions of like, is something going on here? Is there going to be this animosity? Is there going to be this resentment, right? Is Chris Paul really going to change his number? And then based on reports, it sounds like Greg Popovich pulled Keldon Johnson aside and told Keldon Johnson, hey, look, it's the right thing to do. You got to change your number. You got to give up your number. And so lo and behold, Keldon Johnson gives the number to Chris Paul. And now Chris Paul will continue to be CP3, and Keldon Johnson's number is officially going to be number 0. He is going to be the new agent 0. Now, from Keldon Johnson's side of things, look, I actually kind of like this, right? And it's kind of part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this, outside of like the update again, because I know some people have really been following this closely. I've talked about it several times, but I like the jersey change and all that stuff because Keldon Johnson has changed, right? Like, to me, it kind of feels like this is a whole new Keldon Johnson, right? New start, new everything, right? And he has a little bit of this perception of just kind of this one-dimensional, at times kind of selfish player. There's questions about his attitude at times and just the way that he kind of carries himself out there. He is that vacuum scorer, which is fine, right? Like, look at guys like Malik Monk have really built a career as like that 6-man role. Keldon Johnson has been relegated to the bench in that 6-man role for the Spurs. And, he's great. He's a guy who give you 16 a game off the bench. He's a guy that when he's on and cooking, he's on and cooking, right? So he's a guy that I do think can really have an impact. But more than anything, it's the body transformation, right? I mean, this is a guy that has a nickname of the big body. Like, that that usually tells you everything you need to know. And supposedly he's lost 33 pounds, right? Looks, like he put on some muscle, working on his conditioning, his explosiveness is what the reports have came out and said. He's really trying to work on just his just movement and his explosiveness, blowing by the defenders, all that stuff, right? So the idea of like, okay, you got a new Keldon Johnson, body transformation, different mentality, right? Trying to kind of upgrade and elevate his game, be this better player overall, changing his number to number 0. It just feels like this entire it kind of follows the story, right? Boom, Keldon Johnson, new guy, boom, new number. Let's go. Let's see what he's got. Let's see what he can provide this season, right? Because there's also been a lot of talks about him being traded, right? And the San Antonio Spurs have shopped him around, and he was even in and offered up for a Lauri Markkanen, but that ended up not working out. Obviously, Utah ended up keeping Lauri Markkanen and re-signing him. The Warriors were a team that were heavily pushing for Lauri Markkanen, right? Like, but Keldon Johnson was the guy that the Spurs were kind of dangling all off season to try to see if they could get a return for a player or a piece that made a little more sense, particularly alongside Victor Wembanyama, because that's your guy, right? Devin Vassell, Victor Wembanyama, now Stephon Castle. That's kind of your foundation that you're trying to build upon going forward, right? Well, Keldon Johnson basically makes himself untradeable for the Spurs, and he's just, that transformation, the explosiveness and everything just really makes him this better player, right? One, you could argue, make him more valuable in a trade, which, benefits the Spurs. For the Spurs, it's a win-win either way, right? Because if Keldon Johnson does kind of take that next step and does kind of take that next leap, the Spurs are going to be better, and if they still want to trade him, they could trade him and probably get a better return than otherwise. But also, I'm also curious with Keldon Johnson and his transformation, does it kind of take him a little time to kind of get in rhythm? You see a lot of guys that have these transformations or, change their shot or adjust their, same thing with Zion. Zion's lost, 40 pounds or whatever it was, right? And it's does that affect his, not necessarily his explosiveness, but does that impact and affect kind of the way he plays and operates, right? Is he able to be as physical, right? There's a lot of questions when you see these guys kind of have these severe body changes, right? And it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's just, will it take a little time to adjust and kind of, adapt to that new situation? And then, from the Chris Paul standpoint, now you don't run the risk of any frustrations or animosity or just tension or anything, right? Chris Paul maybe still kind of feels a little bit of a way, but you won. You got your number, right? You should be happy. You should be good. Where, if Chris Paul had to change his number, that kind of change things, right? Does Chris Paul kind of, look at Keldon Johnson a different way? Does he kind of, go to the Spurs and now it becomes this big drama? Does it become this big mess, right? Does he kind of, did he talk to Pop, right? And, there's still the potential that there could be a little animosity, right? And Chris Paul is kind of known as that a-hole in the league, right? He's not looked at as this, super nice, friendly, guy. He's very competitive, can kind of be that a-hole, right? But the last thing you want is not only that, but now Chris Paul has kind of this agenda, right? And he's coming in, Chris Paul's there for a very specific reason. He's there to help bolster this Spurs team and kind of help them learn how to win, kind of take some new strides, take some next steps, but also be a guy to help develop and grow guys like a Stephon Castle, a Devin Vassell, a Trey Jones, but also a Keldon Johnson, right? Him and Harrison Barnes and these guys, right? Keldon Johnson is, until otherwise, part of this young core, part of this young foundation. The last thing you want is, the guy who's supposed to be coming in being a mentor is all frustrated and upset and bothered by one of the guys he's supposed to mentor, right? He's supposed to be mentoring. And so I do think that, this is it petty? Is it silly? Sure. But it's also his brand. Again, it's not just a number for Chris Paul. It is his identity. CP3, right? He's not CP0 or CP12 no, he's CP3. His shoes and his companies and his brands and all that. You have to change and revamp everything at that point. It's not as easy to do. Right? It's not, especially when he's built an entire career as CP3 everywhere he's been, everywhere he's gone. There's this attachment to the number. And it's easy to say it's such a silly thing, but just change a number and all that stuff. Chris Paul's being ridiculous or whatever, but he's really not. Again, if your entire brand, if your company's name is, your whatever, your name, and somebody goes, oh, well, your name's John, my name's John, you need to change your name, otherwise, you're gonna feel a type of way about it, right? Again, or it's just, if you have a company and you have a brand and you have brand recognition, it's if Nike had to change their name tomorrow, right, everyone would feel a type of way about it. Everyone would feel a type of thing. Well, Chris Paul is a business. These NBA players are a business. Right? LeBron James by himself is a business. it's not just, this isn't just like, oh yeah, he's a player. No, again, the numbers are a big thing. But, glad this little drama, this little saga with the San Antonio Spurs, it's behind them. It's done. It's over with. All sides, all parties kind of move on, be done, be over with, and get ready for the season, right? Because there is a lot of excitement. There's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of just hope that they can, kind of continue to, take that next step, right? That we can see them kind of adapt and adjust to becoming a playoff team, or at least a play-in team, and then continue to take those strides. This is a development year in a lot of ways, and Chris Paul is supposed to be a big part of that development. Last thing you want is Chris Paul kind of ruining things, or being upset. It's a mess for no reason. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you think that this is petty? Do you think like, nah, I understand, I get it? Do you think Keldon Johnson did the right thing? Do you think, nah, he should have stood pat on his number? I mean, hopefully Chris Paul took care of him. Because it's usually how it goes. Usually you send the guy some bread, or or buy him a car or something like that, right? Usually there's an exchange there, right? So it'd be interesting to see. But anyway, again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot if you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.